Hello, you're listening to the Neil Lamptey Show. My name's Joey, and I'm joined by Paul.
All right, mate.
And by Neil.
Hello.
Was there any doubt in your mind as to whether we would continue doing this pod, given the extended run of success that we've had since we've been away? Neil, you're not a superstitious gentleman, are you?
No, I don't give a shit about anybody. I'm going to go and watch Cov whenever I want, so leave me alone.
This is a brand new Neil Allison that we're getting on the pod this week. Yeah. Neil, Paul, even sorry, you worried about us breaking the spell?
No,
Didn't think so. Moments of the week, Paul. Do you want to start us off?
the watching the highlights and realising that basically all of our chances came from Mickey Doyle set pieces.
What's happened there?
Other teams can't deal with his Zico-esque set piece taking.
But he didn't. When he started becoming chief set piece taker, which I guess coincided with Jordan Shipley sort of moving out of the team. Well, saying that, it was even before that, wasn't it? I think we looked at him and we were a bit like, well, this doesn't seem to be working. I don't really understand why this keeps happening. And then apparently practice makes perfect. If only we'd have known years and years and years ago that he was going to learn how to put in decent corners like this, maybe we'd have been getting on it.
It's like Oggy taking corners, though, isn't it? There's nothing special about them at all. It's just crossing the ball. So maybe that's all you do need. Rather than people trying weird techniques, just get the ball into the danger zone.
I mean, it causes all amount of havoc. It's almost like someone drops a bomb in the middle of it's like everyone just goes panic-stricken. And then you just have a Cov player running away, celebrating having scored another goal from the Mickey Doyle set piece. It's just...
We sound pissed off, don't we? I'm
good. Delighted, yeah. It's just baffling.
Oh, God, yeah. But, yeah, so my moment of the week is just the realisation that Mickey Doyle set pieces are possibly the greatest thing on the planet at this moment in
time. Neil, your moment of the week.
My moment of the week is looking at the league table and seeing a load of green. It's like watching Coventry football manager, isn't it? It's brilliant. So, yeah, that's it. Just I thought we were up to 5th on Saturday when we won, and I don't know what happened, but then I checked again and we're in 7th. So, okay, fine. But it's looking like we're up there. We're fighting, and we're all green. So that means we're the best.
I think we're on. I think we're on the same goal difference as Accrington.
Yeah, we're level with Accrington. I think it's just they've scored one more than us.
Yeah, that sounds about right. One moment of the week, 5 in a row, first time since the 90s, is pretty special. Obviously, lots of other good stuff. I think Tom Bayliss has been fabulous in this run. I'm really pleased to see how he's settled into that central midfield role and is just showing League One what an incredible player he is. But my moment of the week, it goes to... I don't know if either of you listened to CWR. Well, Paul, I'm guessing you didn't. Neil, did you listen to any of CWR on Saturday?
No, I missed it.
Co-commentator Andy Blair did a perfectly fine job. But there's something he said that I haven't been able to shake out of my head since it happened. And I think partly it's because of how confidently he said it and how he kept repeating it. But before kickoff, he was talking about... He was talking about some facet of football in play, and it was like he happened upon this sentence, and then he continued to. He said, and that's the thing, Clive. He said, fashion never goes out of style. Right,
yes.
Right. And
that's genius.
I can't stop thinking about it. And then of course, it was like he'd happened upon it. And then he was like reveling in his own genius. He was just like that. And like I say, fashion never goes out of style. And I can't think to myself, you keep saying it like you're firming up in your own mind that it makes any sense. It doesn't make any. It's the opposite. It doesn't make. That's what fashion is. It's almost the very definition of fashion is that it goes in and out of style. Andy, you don't have to say everything that you think.
He's committing to it, yeah.
Yeah. The other
Good
thing,
on him.
but this isn't criticise Andy Blair session. This is just the overall section of the show that we like to call comment on CWR. But as well, the baffling situation of the fact that he had his son playing for Doncaster in that game, and in the second half especially, it did just turn into like player cam. Where
really?
It was just largely him commentating on his own son. And then occasionally someone would talk about what else is happening in the game. Yeah, it was.
Did he get slagged off? Because remember that time Carl Baker was on and someone rang up and gave him a load of grief just for having like some anecdotes. It's like, that's exactly what Carl Baker's there for, isn't he? Give us some sort of thoughts.
The other thing, just while we're on CWR watch, before we move on to the actual football, is another highlight while we were off was Martin Winch reading out a text from someone that just said Martin in, Clive out.
Yes. That entire night.
Just thought, you can't read that out. That's you basically advocating you having someone else's job.
You're supposed to discriminate slightly, aren't you? Like, look through them, have a quick second. Do I say this or not? And he read everything.
He read everything. I really felt like, what if I'd have read that text out and I did it live? And I expect presumably he's got no like production team or whatever, and so he's just reading out whatever he gets, like Ron Burgundy off an auto prompter. But that he is able to, when he reads something out like that, he should probably go, well, that's silly or whatever. But he was just like, we've got a text here that says Martin in, Clive out. Anyway, next text. You're like, no. That's not on. That's you advocating to have someone else's job that you've temporarily stepped in.
Did he react
for.
to it at all?
He just moved straight on. He moved straight on like he was just like, yep, fair. Completely agree.
Agree with that one. Next.
Yeah, Winchy.
My favourite one was you were sending in a few, which obviously weren't legit, but he was reading them all out, and then he read a reply to you, which I think it was from Ian Heron or something. It was just it was just a genuine reply to you, nothing to do special.
With it weren't texting CWR or whatever.
No context or anything. He just it's like he's reading the entire thread, and then he goes and he's like, don't really know what that means. So then he moves on to the next one. It's like, okay, Martin.
Yeah, that was a great fun night. 4 goals. Winchy.
A great laugh.
Right, actual football. Paul, you were at the game. I watched it from my base in Munich as usual. You weren't happy about the way that the second half panned out, were you?
Well, that's a loaded question and a half, isn't it? Not a case of, obviously I was happy that we won. I wasn't. It was.
Break it down from the top.
The problem is sometimes your links are really good, but they don't help the situation. Let's jump into the 90-minute football game by talking about the second half. We've got to put the context in of the fact that we were obviously 2-0 up at half-time to have the second half that we had. Also, the team we were playing against, Doncaster, are quite a good team who up to that point had scored quite a lot of goals. So all these things have got to be context. You're starting at the start. What I like at the moment is the fact that I know what our starting 11's going to be. Yes. I know what our formation's going to be. And for the first time in a long time, you actually look at it and you're like, there's a settled unit there. I think you go back to the last game that we lost, the Bristol Rovers game. The two things that came out of that was obviously Sterling's performance, getting whipped off at half-time. And since then, he really has stepped it up a level. And the other thing was, it was the game where Bayliss was missing, and it just proves that we can't play the way we play without someone like Bayliss in the centre midfield.
Yeah.
And we don't have anyone else in the squad like Tom Bayliss, so he has to start. And he's just, as you said earlier, he's just key. He ties it all together because he wants to move forward. He carries the ball forward. He's looking to bring the team forward. He's looking to play the passes forward. He doesn't. One of my problems still with Doyle is at one point in the second, I think Doyle just went to the left wing, and you were like, "Why are you there? Why? You've taken the ball off Brown. You've taken the ball on the left wing. You've passed it back to Brown, and you put us in trouble." The thing with Bayliss is he doesn't piss around. He stays in the centre of the park. You can pass the ball to him, and he can actually make things happen. He's the focal point of that team. And for whether or not, but the first half was a bit of an odd one. We scored 2 lovely goals. Both of them are fantastic strikes. And, take nothing away, they're great goals. We also missed 2 absolute sitters. The one that Jordan Willis put over the bar.
Yeah.
Just don't even,
Your speechlessness there probably it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
And the other one was JCH. The problem we have with JCH is he's not particularly quick, and we've seen that a couple of times this season, that if he breaks the line 30 yards from goal, he doesn't back himself, probably rightly, he doesn't back himself to go from there and score. So he tries to shoot too early. He tries to get that shot away because he knows if he doesn't, he's going to get tackled. But he's still making those runs, and fair play to JCH. He's leading the line really well. He's taking responsibility. He's leading the team. I don't think Saturday was his best game that I've seen him have recently, but I thought that he made Doncaster's life more difficult, and he's definitely proven his worth. He's definitely stepped it up.
He also played in 2 of the games that we didn't cover because we weren't podding. He had really good games, didn't he? There was the one where they made the mistake of riling him up, and I can't remember what game it was. Maybe it was Southend, where he was man of the match in that for me. And then
was it the away game?
Yeah, one of the away games where they really tried to get into him, and it perfectly played into what he wanted. And there was a game recent. I mean, it's awful. I can't remember the names of the teams that we played, but there was it. But I don't think he played particularly well on Saturday, but I do think it's probably worthwhile saying that he had been very good in a couple of the games that we'd missed.
Yeah, and I think the question mark was whether or not he could step it up. And he scored a couple of goals recently, and he's having big performances, and he is the focal point. I think, I thought even though it wasn't his best game, I thought he was better than Chaplin up front. I know me and you sort of slightly disagree on this, Joe. I thought he added something. His movement was good. He was looking to link up. Second half, you felt sorry for him because he was getting more and more isolated. You could also see that he'd played 3 times in a week and he was getting tired. And he wasn't providing that outlet towards the end of the game, which we needed him to do. But I don't blame him for that. I think the issues for that were other places. I also thought Doncaster were quite a nice team. They're quite a nice team to watch.
I thought so, yeah.
And I think that was almost, to some extent, their hindrance in the second half is the fact that they wanted to play football. They wanted to move the ball around. And I know we're obviously not objective on this podcast because we're all Coventry City fans, but we were 2-0 up. On another day, I don't think we were 2-0 better than Doncaster at half-time. We were just 2-0 up. Second half, because that basically sums up the first half, it was interesting. It was an interesting game of football, but there wasn't lots of chances, were there? There was quite a lot of play in the middle of the park. Both teams were quite happy to have the ball at the back and play it around a little bit.
Just before we move on, can we have a word for the quality of the finishes with a bit more detail? I thought Hawula's, the technique to keep that down and to hit it first time, I thought was really special. A lot more special. I'm quite surprised at how little has been made of that as a finish.
Yeah, I think he is. And I think he obviously got the confidence from the goal he scored against Bradford, where he's in the team now. It's taken him a while to get his place in the team. I like the fact he's different from Shipley, where he's basically just direct, isn't he?
Yeah,
and
he just wants to get up there and shoot.
Yeah, I can't remember who the last home game was against because, like you, it's like all these teams just roll into one. But the last home game, he had a couple of you're like, with a bit more like the last home game, he didn't play particularly well, but he did a lot of things.
Yeah,
they just weren't working for him. But you could sort of see that he just needed game, he needed that confidence. And he had a bit of a break, and you were like, I think in time. And then he scored against Bradford, where he just got the ball, he just ran, and he just shot. It's like the oft-mentioned Jimbo is like, you could see as soon as he got the ball, he was either going to miss the target, he was going to score. That was the only thing in his head. And you were like, that's what he needed. And yeah, I suppose the thing is you compare it to Jordan Willis's, which was a lot closer and a lot easier. The composure from Hawula to put that into the bottom corner. But I suppose that's why one's a striker and one's a centre half. It's that instinctive finish. Luke Thomas's is one of those ones. It's from outside the area. It's through a load of players. It pings off the post and goes in. He's needed that. He's an interesting player. Me and you have had discussions whether or not how good he actually is. I think hopefully that goal's going to give him confidence to have more to make better choices. I still don't think he makes the best choices in the world, but he's an 18-year-old kid. If he was making really good choices, he probably wouldn't have been loaned out to a League One side.
Well, while we're on Thomas, I thought he was the best player on the pitch on Saturday, and I think actually that thing of he wouldn't have been loaned out to a League One side, I think there was a lot of Derby fans that were expecting him to feature very heavily this season, and then they signed Harry Wilson and Mason Mount and whatever, and I just don't think he can quite get him past them, which is bizarre that. Do you know what I mean? They're effectively like it's a domino effect. He can't. He has to go out on loan because of players that have come in on loan. It was a bit strange, but there was it. But I thought it was defensively that he was so impressive, and it felt like he stepped up that defensive work after he got it. I think that goal will make a massive difference to him because I think hopefully it will mean that he won't be forced into. And if we're being kind and saying that it's the pressure of not having scored that's forcing him to shoot rather than passing, but hopefully it will feel like a weight off his shoulders and now he can focus on making the right decisions. But if he keeps up that defensive work that he put in, he gets in on that alone. Because the thing with Bayless you were talking about earlier about him being able to pass the ball forward is I think it's just as important that he is able to play effectively off the ball as well. So his tackling is fantastic and he can win the ball back and then use it. And I think him doing that allows us to play those attacking wide players in Thomas and Hiwula with a bit more safety because he can go back. But on top of that, if Thomas then actually puts a shift in and defends as well, they really are quite a dynamic unit, aren't they?
Well, I think the reason I don't talk about Bayless's defensive plays because if you look at every other central midfielder we've got at the club, they're going to provide Bayless's defensive play. If you put in a Gogo or Kelly, you're asking them basically to do that defensive play. So I don't think, I think whoever you play as opposed to Bayless, you're still going to be able to probably get away with those dynamic wingers because
I think you get overrun. I think if you had a dead weight in the middle and two players who weren't putting particularly a great deal of defensive duty in, because Hiwula's not really providing anything, and I don't blame him either. He's a striker playing out on the left wing. I think that actually he's very adept at winning the ball back, and it just.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm saying that I don't think you're putting in a dead weight. I think if you bring in Kelly or bring in a Gogo, their main role is to win tackles and win the ball back.
Sorry, I see what you mean. Yeah, and then
that's ostensibly that's all they are, aren't they? I mean, to some extent, it's interesting that we have no one like Bayless, literally no one. Every other player in the team you could probably replace with someone relatively similar. Even with Thomas, you could replace him with Jody Jones. You can't replace Bayless.
No.
Because we don't have anyone. And to some extent, me and Pritchard had a big argument about this recently. It's like whether or not there are that many players like Bayless in League One anyway.
No.
Whether or not it's you bring in someone of that type, how easy it is to bring in someone not only of that quality, but also what that sort of player is. I mean, basically, he is the old-style box-to-box midfielder, isn't he?
Well, he can do everything.
Yeah.
That's it's not an overstatement. He can do everything.
Yeah, and it's like, the thing is you don't buy players of that quality in League One. You hopefully produce them, because that's the only way you're going to get a Bayless in League One or League, as we had him last season in League Two. In the same way, you only get a Maddison if you produce them, because you see the Mason Mount at Derby. They're coming through Premier League clubs. They're not going to drop down to League One. You get different types of players, but top quality central midfielders. You don't see many in League One not doing what he's doing. That's again the only other player you can think of a comparison was probably Dele Alli, who came from Milton Keynes youth team. So I think, I think Thomas has also benefited from playing more defensively recently. I'm more like in midfield, I think, but also the other player who deserves a lot of credit is Sterling, who's I think getting better and better. And I know we obviously didn't discuss the Wickham game. That was it, where he carried the ball from basically just outside our penalty area before he crossed it in for the goal.
Yeah, on the 81st minute as well. So late in the game, he's going on a long bursting 100. Well, on like a 100-yard run, maybe not long bursting.
Yeah, and I mean, also, the other will throw in Jordan Willis's other oh my god moment was in the second half where he had that chance to do anything in the world. He literally could have done anything. He could have sat on the ball at that point. He had so much time and space, and he smashed the ball as hard as he could out of play. And you were like, for fuck's sake. But what I do like about both Jordan Willis and Davis is, at the moment, you put the ball into the box, they're going to try and win it. They're not frilly players. They're not players who are going to do, Tom Davis loves his 60-yard pass from his defensive position to the right wing. That you can't take that away from him because that's basically how he kicks the ball. I don't really want them on the ball. I've never wanted them on the ball. But in terms of defensive play, of actually being defenders, they've been key to this run as well, because Doncaster found it difficult to get around them. They put in a really good defensive display in terms of winning things, kicking things, and heading things and blocking things. And I think individually there were some ropey-ish performances. I think as a unit, we're looking more of a unit, more cohesive than we have done in a long time, more than probably than we did last season when we won promotion.
Yeah.
At this moment in time, that 11 seems to be working. The only player you've got probably question marks over is the other fullback, is Junior Brown, who again ranged from being absolutely absurdly useless to making a critical clearance off the line. And for me, with Brown, he does stupid things in an almost over-eager way. Like in the second half, he gave away a free kick because he'd tried to win the ball too early, and then he'd sort of tried to, and each thing he just escalated sort of an eagerness, not a lack of aptitude or intelligence. It was just like, oh, that hasn't worked, so I've got to do this. I've got to, and it's like, if you'd just calmed down and just sort of shadowed the player, you would have closed him down. He'd have had to take a different option. You didn't have to try and win the ball back. You don't have to win. I know it sounds strange. As a defender, you don't have to win the ball every time. Sometimes you got to do is just stop the opposition from doing what they want to do.
He reminds me, and I know people are going to think it's because of the hair, and it's not. He reminds me a little bit of David Luiz with that tendency, and Thomas Vermaelen used to do it a lot as well, tendency to be drawn really quickly to the ball. So as soon as they see an opportunity to try and go towards the ball, irrespective of who is around or whatever, they're really forthright about going for it, and it often leaves them out of position, and if they miss it, then they're gone, and there's a massive gap down the back of them. And I think it's part of you wants to be nice and say, oh, it's proactive, and he wants to try and get into it, but it just seems careless. Like, it just seems like it's, you think, you just assess the situation. You don't need to go charging off towards the ball and the man every single time, because it's leaving us backwards a little bit. Neil, have you got much of a thought on Junior Brown from what you've seen recently?
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but question sort of the intelligence side of things, and not in a harsh way, but I think there's an eagerness thing there, but then I don't know how many times you can continue to be eager and continue to make these mistakes before you start to question whether it's just he's never going to learn from this mistakes. And I see it a bit too often, I think, where he is, as Paul said, he doesn't think things through, and he's really impulsive, and he makes the wrong decision. And I mean, we've seen it with the poor free kicks he gives away, and I think he gave away a penalty recently as well. And it was just, I think, as a sort of a fundamental player, I think there's a solid left back in there. I just think I don't know how you eradicate all the other things, the moments which are going to cost you. And that's, God, I sound like Brent then. It'll cost you. Oh, okay, move on. Yeah, I'm happy with him, because I think there's a familiarity there, at least with everybody else around him, and as a team as a whole now, there is that sort of settled nature of it. So even if he does continue with these mistakes, I think there's far more value in keeping him in the team because of the way that everybody else is probably playing around him and kind of understanding his game now. I guess you just hope that that maybe if the run progresses or the team becomes even more familiar and start to kind of believe in themselves from a sort of quality perspective, then hopefully he too will maybe settle down as well, because I think there's still an element of it being a new club for him desperate to impress, and he probably thinks he hasn't quite done that yet. But let's just end point. I want him to settle down. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, isn't it? Paul, do you want to pick it up from there? Am I going to link the second half too early again?
No. I mean, yeah. So the second half started, and to be fair to Doncaster, they came out from minute one, and they got on top. And then it's always difficult when you're 2-0 up. 2-0 up is the worst scoreline, all that bollocks. But it's just, we didn't really know what we were trying to achieve to start off with. Like, the team were a bit, they obviously, they're buoyant because they're 2-0 up. But as I said, it wasn't like they dominated the first half. It was quite an even game. So the fact that Doncaster sort of started quite well wasn't to be that unexpected. It wasn't like we were playing a team who we were expecting to be 4-0. Therefore, when they came out in the second half, they were like, "How do we keep this down, lads?" It was a case of like Doncaster were a decent side, so if they got slightly on top, it wouldn't have been that much of a surprise. But it was amazing how quickly they got on top and how we didn't quite, with the players on the pitch, quite know how we were going to go about things. And then we took off Bayliss and brought on Kelly, and you were just like, that's. It sends a message to everyone, doesn't it? It sends the message of we're sitting. It sends a message to the players, sends a message to the fans, and it sends a message to the opposition. We're sitting on what we've got. We're 2-0 up. We're content that we've scored. We'll try and get on the counter, but mainly we're now trying to keep it tight. And Doncaster scored, like Bradford had scored on Tuesday when we'd taken Bayliss on, brought Kelly on. It's a attitude changer. It's an emphasis changer. For me, it doesn't work. I know we went on to win, and you could say yes, it does work. So the only thing you can either go off is the end product, and the end product is we won the game, making the substitutions we did. That's fine. As I said, for me, what was quite interesting is the fact that Doncaster continued to play football. They continued to sort of knock it around. They took a lot of time out of the game by aimlessly passing it around the back four. And I think when they scored, got it back to 2-1, I think they were almost like, we're going to do this. But they never really sort of stepped up their emphasis. They never stepped up their pace of the game. The game stayed at quite an average tempo. It wasn't slow by any means, but it wasn't. You'd never thought that they're actually really going for this. They're trying to get it back to 2-2. It was almost like, we've got half an hour to go or 20 minutes to go. We'll do this. And then I didn't think Chaplin had a particularly, as we discussed this earlier, I don't think Chaplin had a particularly good game. It wasn't a surprise when he went off. The surprise was we brought a Go-Go on, and you're now literally playing three defensive midfielders. You've just handed the complete initiative to Doncaster now. It's basically going to be whether or not Doncaster can score. That's basically what this last 15 minutes is going to be. It's going to be whether or not Doncaster score. And so you had JCH up front on his own. The balls weren't really going to him, so he wasn't able to stick. So it was a lot of Doncaster possession, bringing forward. They had chances. Luckily, Round cleared one off the line. They had other chances which went wide of the post. There was a couple of goal-mark scrambles. We made, as I said earlier, Willis and Davis made some really good blocks. We defended really well. It was just a case of, have we invited too much pressure? Did we need to do this? Did we need to make those? Did we need to give them that much initiative? And I suppose the question is, it's like, I know this is what you're sort of feeling on, Joey. It's like a case of, well, if we hadn't have made those defensive changes and we'd have conceded 2 goals, everyone would be saying, well, he should have made defensive changes. I think one of the reasons, as I said earlier, I think we got away against Doncaster is because they continued to play football. My feeling would be if we did it against Accrington, I think we'd probably concede 2. I think once it depends how teams take that initiative. You hand them the initiative, and it's like, this is your responsibility now. We've set our stall up. Our stall up is basically to protect what we've got. It's now down to you to break us down. And I think that some teams would have used that opportunity more than Doncaster did. I think they'd have put more balls into our box. They'd have created more corners and free kicks and really tested us. I think we were lucky that Doncaster was still, as I said, they were wasting time by doing, like, you don't need to pass the ball between your centre halves. It was just like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think in the means to an end, it worked, and it's great. We won that game. I'd worry that that's where we would go. I wouldn't want us to do that every time, because I think we didn't need to hand, with the substitutions, with the players we had on the bench. I know, sorry, he brought Jody Jones on, didn't he, for Chaplin, and then moved Hawula up front, and then took him off for a go-go. But it was the case of you could have put Bakayoko up front for JCH. He was clearly tired.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
And the thing is, if you'd have had 2 up front, they wouldn't have been able to pass the ball around the back. You could have disrupted them. We made it easy for them. They didn't capitalise on that, and that's brilliant. I'm glad we won, obviously, and it's like it worked as a tactic against that Doncaster side, but it was a bit it was for me. It felt too passive. It was too much a case of this is it now. We've settled. Please have the ball.
Yeah, well, and the last pod that we did, we talked about the comeback against Charlton, and Charlton were in pretty much total control of the game up until sort of 60, 70 minutes, and then weirdly they relinquished control of the game because they thought, well, we'll try and sit back and we've done all right so far, so let them have the ball for a bit. And eventually we scored 2 goals, and I think that they could have scored 2 goals. I think just thinking about it while you were talking there, we touched on this on WhatsApp a little bit, but I think I agree with you about this sort of nominal idea of inviting them to come on at us, but I think a big part of it is, and to go back to a game that we seem to talk about pretty much every week, Mansfield away last season, where we went down to 10 men and scraped it back to a draw. We've talked about this a bunch of times, where the big thing of that was the fact that you'd got Bayliss and Shipley in the middle, who, when the ball was sprung out of defence, they were able to put their foot on it and buy us a little bit of time in the middle, and that they could sort of allow us to come back up the pitch and use their talent to slow things down or control the tempo of the game. And as soon as we took Bayliss off, and specifically Chaplin off as well, who I think does a really good job of doing that, we were just booting the ball out, and it was just, like you say, they would have done a better job to have pumped it straight back into us. But we were pumping it out, and it was just going straight back to them. And I think that gave them such a greater level of impetus because they had so much possession in that last 10, 15 minutes. And the other thing was, like you say, was I think it was very frustrating to see Johnson Clark-Harris left on, not because he was underperforming, but because he just looked so furiously tired. And there was a moment before Chaplin came off, where Chaplin picked the ball up on the halfway line and drove forward with it and did what I was talking about, where sort of he wouldn't go on a massive bursting forward direct run. He was trying to shield the ball and whatever, and you could see that he was desperate to try and release it. Johnson Clark-Harris was so tired that he just stood there, and that when he got the ball, he just passed it straight back to Chaplin, who was in trouble. And you just, at that point, I just thought, yeah, he needs to come off. He's just totally done for. So I could understand what the idea was of leaving him on when there was such a clear, ready-made replacement in Bakayoko. You could have thought that you could have actually justified the decision to bring Agogo on if you effectively had just gone to like a 7-0-3 and you just defend in a big lump like that, and then you could spring the ball out, because if you've got 3 really quick players who could get on it and cause trouble, because they did, Thomas and Jones did occasionally get on the ball and try and fashion something, but in the end I think that there was a couple of them where it broke up because of Johnson Clark-Harris. And I don't want to be critical of him, I just think he played 3 games in a week in a really testing role, really physical role that he's doing well in, and he was just shot. But it just didn't feel like and I got battered the other week because I said that substitution is batshit when he took off Chaplin and brought on Jones, I think. And it was largely because it meant that he'd moved Luke Thomas up to play centre forward. And I just was like, well, what are you thinking there? And then, of course, Jones scored, and I got pilloried for not knowing anything, which is true, but it was more nuanced than that.
But isn't it like the 10-year anniversary from the Wayne Andrews substitution?
Well,
and the thing about the Wayne, if I ever met Mickey Adams, I'd explain this to him. The fans weren't booing the fact he brought on Wayne Andrews. What they were booing was he had 2 strikers on the pitch. One of them was being shit, the other one was playing well. He took off the player who was playing well.
Yeah, and yeah.
That's what the issue was. It wasn't the fact that everyone thought that's the world's worst substitution. It's like everyone agreed a substitution had to be made. The thing is, it's like he took off the player that no one could understand why he took him off.
I guess the problem was they also told him that he didn't know what he was doing. He probably took a little bit of umbrage to that, didn't he?
Mm.
I think, yeah. But I think it was also because I don't think that he was going for a particularly decent spell at that point, and he left not that long after that either.
Yeah, it did feel like the writing was on the wall at the point where Wayne Andrews was just at the club. You felt that was a manager that wasn't long for this world.
Just living there.
I think it's one of those things where we played I thought as a unit, as a team, we played well, and clearly we deserved to win. I thought individually there were performances which were slightly below par in terms of how they reacted to the environment, that all the things that were going on around them. And I also think that if I would like to think that we've learned from the fact that it did work, but that doesn't mean that it's the best option always to hand the initiative to the opposition. But in terms of where we are in the run of form, where we are with the players we've got, where, we've obviously already mentioned Burge this season's having a really good season. I said Sterling's coming on. Luke Thomas, the sort of two debutants this season, have really stepped it up in the last couple of weeks. Bayliss is looking more and more assured in League One. I think Doyle had a good game. You've got obviously Hawula's coming in. He's a bit of a funny player, as you say. He's not really a left winger, but I think he's so different from what Shipley was giving us that his pace and directness is helping the attacking part of the team. The centre-back partnership, I understand, why he goes for Davis and Willis probably over Hyam. I think those two there's a partnership there. You'll never catch me calling them particularly good footballers, but I don't think that matters. I think you can be a centre-forward and a centre-back and not be the world's best footballer, but still be very important to your team. Yeah, and they do a job. I think we're playing a little less football out of the back these days. I don't think that hurts us. Yeah. Because I don't think they're particularly good footballers. So why would you want those players on the ball more? I think the fact that JCH has really stepped it up is he's definitely proven me wrong. I didn't think he was. I didn't think he could be as effective as he's been. I think there's still, obviously there's always things to improve. I think I'd like to see a bit more out of Chaplin at the last two home games. I don't think he's been at his best. I really thought the goal against Wycombe would really give him a boost. I was slightly underwhelmed by him on Saturday. Again, I know we discussed this. We don't agree to some extent, but I still think he's making very odd decisions. He still looks like he's lacking that little bit of confidence. I think it must be quite odd for him because he's coming from a place where he was a bit part player to where he is the main man. He is the main striker. We are playing him. I know we are playing 4-4-2. He's playing slightly deeper than that. It's not quite a 4-4-1-1, but it's not. He's definitely not on the last shoulder where I think he would be more comfortable. But he's one thing we could never take away, and I think this is probably the same for all of them, is whenever they're having bad individual performances, they all work extremely hard.
Yeah.
They make life extremely difficult for the opposition in their attitude, the way that they press the back four, the fact they all work together as a unit. I know on this podcast we've not always given Mark Robins probably the praise that some would feel he deserves. I think if nothing else at this moment in time, we look like a cohesive unit. We look like a team that's got a plan, which I don't think.
Well, I feel like but I feel like he's completely. So the two things that I would have liked to have seen more than anything was one, a more sort of clear idea about where goals will come from, and that team at the moment. I know that he's had a lot of shots and has only scored one goal, but I would put Luke Thomas, Bayliss, even Doyle to a certain extent, Hawula, Chaplin and Johnson Clark-Harris all down as goal threats, and you can't argue with that number of attacking players on the pitch, and he's been able to put them on the pitch in such a way where we don't look defensively frail. He's not jettisoned all of his defensive principles. I think he'd probably like to be more defensive, wouldn't he? But he has everything that I've whinged about for the last 12 months, even despite promotions and cup wins and whatever else. I feel completely satisfied at now. I look at that team. I understand how they're trying to play. I understand how they're trying to score goals, and it, empirically is working. And I'm not saying this isn't fucking I told you so, because we could easily go on a 5-game losing run. But what I would say, if we didn't win in the next 5, I wouldn't be advocating a mass breakup of that starting 11. There might be odd bits of it that you'd tinker with, but that I would say that they're tweaks rather than. Does that make sense? Is what's it? I just think it's. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't want to see Kelly come in for Bayliss on a more regular basis. And I think that we continue on with the way that we're going. Neil, I wanted to ask you about Chaplin because we are the official Connor Chaplin podcast, obviously, and we've not talked about him as much as people would obviously like us to. So, what have you made of him so far?
I've been more impressed than I thought I would be. He's a really neat footballer. I think there's a lot of trust placed in him from the players around him. I think they recognise he's clever. He knows what he's doing with the ball, and people like Bayliss, I think they know they can link up well with him. I agree. I don't think he's been quite at the same level in the previous couple of last two games I've seen him actually. One I didn't see at the weekend, but it was the home game and then another one. But I think he is what we needed actually, and I think out of nowhere the combination with JCH looks like it could grow into something. I think at the moment they're still quite sort of isolated and they can be quite individual in how they play, but it still works as a team. But I think over the course of time, I think those two could sort of develop something quite neat between them. And it's just one of those. I think I saw something earlier about like the whole fantasy football kind of points at different league levels, and he's got a decent number if you were to equate it for League One, which is, considering he only came in back end of August, it's a pretty decent return from really. So he's getting the points. Getting the points. He's having an impact for the team. He's getting goals, getting a few goals now. He's setting some things up. So no, I'm pleased for him.
I think it's indicative that specifically. So I think there was I think bearing in mind that he's not, like you say, he's missed a month and that he has. Still saying that, I think the team that he was in was the team for October that they'd done.
Okay.
But even still, he hasn't. The guy from Plymouth was in there who scored 6 goals in his last 6 games, and he's not hammering goals in at that sort of rate. The thing that I think he's done is he has. All of his stats are good, aren't they? So he doesn't lose the ball an awful lot. He has shots. His kind of all-round game. I think that thing that contributes to and we're going to get very technical here, so I won't stay on it for long, but the thing in Fantasy Football League that equates into bonus points for performances, I can see where he'd do well there because he is a huge part of everything that we do, isn't he? I know I've said this to you. I think I've not said it on the pod yet. He is not the player that I was described to me when we signed him. I was led to believe that we were signing a off-the-shoulder goal poacher, very similar to McNulty. That his facet was that he would bury anything, and that was that. And instead, what I can see is someone who looks like a dynamic, hard-working, chase the ball down number 10, who links play well and is intelligent and whatever. And it's not that that's better or worse. I think he will get better as time goes on, but I've been super impressed because he is right up my street for what I want to see from a player. But he's just not, if anything, he's been marked out finishing wise for he should have more goals, shouldn't he?
Well, those first few games, he took a little while and he was snatching at things, so he could have had a few more in there. And what I like about him is it's this sort of fundamental game. The easy stuff, it is easy to him, and like even the hard stuff, he controls the ball. Sometimes he has an off touch every now and then, but you sort of see when you can look at all the players individually, you sort of see the good players and the ones who have to work for it, and then him. He doesn't really have to work for it. He's small, but he's just got an air of sort of class about him. And even if he's having a quietish game, there's good touches in there, and I like that. I don't like having to worry about a player because if they're having a poor game, everything's going to go to pot. And certain players, I mean, I'm going to say Shipley here. I think sometimes he has to work to compensate for the fact that he can have quite erratic games of football. I still like him, but I think he's just an example of that sort of player who maybe sometimes it doesn't quite come as naturally as some of the others.
Fair dues. Anything before we move on from that game, Paul, Neil?
Just one more thing, just about sort of the squad in general. I think what sort of striking me at the moment, and it's only been 5 games of winning, which means that you haven't got that much amount of sort of data to look through. But I like that you could still bring in other players from the bench at the moment, and it wouldn't seem to disrupt the entire team. So if you brought in Jody Jones for someone. I don't think it would. I wouldn't want to do this, but I like the idea that we've got these people on the bench who can come on. And as opposed to last year, when I felt like if you're bringing on Cara Reid, it completely threw the dynamic of the team entirely. I feel like our subs now, they can have an impact without totally messing up with the team.
Yeah, and I will be very quick to hold my hands up and say, a month or so ago, I think I would have been leading the charge of saying, you get Chaplin, and so why did you sign Hiwula and why did you sign Bakayoko? And he's just stuck that right up my bollocks because now you look at it and you go, oh, because Hiwula, can play up front if someone gets injured, actually operates very well off the left and provides a goal threat. Bakayoko is going to score 20 goals. Actually, you've got if Doyle gets injured, you've got a go waiting to come in. Kelly's still knocking about there. Like you say, Jones, ideally, I mean, really, you would hope that what happens is that that Thomas goes back in January, and that's Jones, because Jones is fully fit and that's his spot again. But actually, you look around and you think, if we got an injury, we're not knackered anywhere, are we?
No, so like in defence as well. That's the one that's got me. Like, what tends to happen is it just feels totally different whenever you have to break up a central defensive partnership. But we've seen this kind of enforced rotation that's happened over the last sort of 10 games where you've had Hyam playing really well. Davis has come in and really stood up. Obviously, he prefers Willis and Davis, but in the games where Hyam's jumped back in, things have still looked fairly sturdy. And it's things like that which I like the look of. And that, in a weird way, is it feels like the hallmark of a stronger squad where they all feel more familiar with each other than maybe in previous years when you've kind of had something that's relatively settled, but the moment any of those cogs falls out of place, everything else just seems to collapse. And it doesn't seem quite like that this year. I mean, 10-match losing streak, but for now that makes sense.
Yeah, and
I still think if we lost Bayliss we'd be in deep trouble.
Obviously there are caveats within there, but as a broad point.
Yeah,
I agree. I think, as I said earlier, I think you can replace. There are options to replace virtually everyone in that team. I wouldn't like to see Burge get injured because I don't think O'Brien's a long-term player I would particularly trust. But yeah, it's. And I don't know. It's also the fact that Bayliss is the sort of player that I want to watch. So we were discussing that on Saturday when he rode those challenges and then played that ball through to JCH. And like one of the questions was, obviously, if he was in a high division, he probably wouldn't have got away with doing what he did to get away from the two players. If that makes sense, he sort of lost the ball but won it back. If that makes sense. But then once he gets on the ball in those positions and he drives forward, he's getting harder and harder to stop, and he's making the right decisions. He's playing the ball to the right players, and he's basically the key to that team, isn't he? He's linking it all together. You take him out, Kelly and Agogo just aren't those type of guys, and that's the concern is you just if something happened to him, how the team would be able to react, because that's just so crucial to the way we work. But on top of that, you just find a different way, don't you? And that might be what they've got to do in January. I mean, that's the concern is how long can you keep? I know he signed a new contract, but how long can you keep someone like that in League One? How much do you want? You want your players to have that potential that they want to test themselves. Hopefully, if you're in and around the playoffs, you go to Bayliss and say, look, just give us till the summer. But that's always going to be part of your discussions, hasn't it? It's like, where do you go? I think the issue, as you say, with Luke Thomas, I think you could probably extend Luke Thomas's loan till the summer because he's not going to get in the Derby team. I know what you were saying earlier, but for me, he looks like he's at the stage where he needs to be in League One because the mistakes he makes, the opportunity he wastes, he can get more and more in League One. In the Championship, it's that next level up if you've got to be a bit more clinical and a bit more decisive. So, that's where we're at, aren't we? We're hopefully getting better as a team, and hopefully we can keep this team together.
good times overall, I would say. Good times. Let them roll. I think it's going to be tough on Saturday when we've got Accrington. Dom, I spoke to earlier. He's going to do some preview for you right now. Hi, Dom. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be on the pod as always.
Accrington on Saturday. Thoughts?
Well, I've had a pretty good start to the season. I haven't literally looked at the table, but they're in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure. I think it's only like a goal which separates us.
Yeah, the same goal difference as us. I think it's goals scored that they're ahead of us on.
Yeah, so basically, if we win this game, we're in the playoffs. Obviously, Accrington are sort of famous for being small, for being not famous. So, yes, while it's surprising in that regard that they're in the playoffs in League One, I think anyone who watched them play against us last season isn't surprised. They're just a very good, well-organised team which know what they're doing.
I know that the league table doesn't lie, but do you think they were the best team in League Two last season? I certainly did.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see us play Luton, so I mean, I don't have too many. I can't compare them to Luton, who obviously they challenged for the title with. But yeah, they just seemed a very, very good side. Sort of had a good balance. They knew how to defend and were very efficient and quite good in attack as well.
That attack home to, I guess, their biggest names, Billy Key, Sean McConville. Anybody else that might be a little bit less well known to look out for?
Yeah, so by the way, Sean McConville, who has been one of their best players this season, is suspended for this game, which is
really?
a huge boost for us, to be honest. But on the other flank, have a player called Jordan Clark, but that's spelled without an E, who's a very good technical player. And usually with Accrington, they're two wide men, and then with sort of overlapping fullbacks as well. They're very good at just sort of working situations where they build a ball on one side of the pitch, build an overlap, cross into the box, and the other wide man is making a late run into the box, and they score a lot of goals that way. So Jordan Clark, it's a bit fair to them. Usually it's Sean McConville on the side. It's probably going to be Piero Mingoya, who was with them a couple of years ago, and then moved to Cambridge for bigger money, basically, and then they've re-signed over the summer after winning promotion, who's just a very good, energetic winger, maybe not quite as much of a goal scorer as McConville or Clark. And then up front with Biddy Key, last season they had Caden Jackson, who was just really, really, really fast, who they used to stretch defences. They've got a guy now called Afrandi Zanzala, which is an amazing name.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. It brings to mind, I don't know if you've heard the Bob Dylan song, The Life and Death of Patty Carroll.
No.
There's William Zangzinger?
Right.
is one of the characters in the song. Yeah, always think them whenever I hear that name. But yeah, he's a different kind of threat. He's massive, basically, Zanzala, and using sort of bludgeon defence that way, and it's quite similar to Biddy Key's style of play. So they've got two really big physical players up front, which are going to keep Davis and Willis or whoever plays at centre back really occupied there. So we're going to have to be on it defensively. And then in goal, they have Connor Ripley, who really, really shouldn't be playing in League One, let alone at Accrington. With all due respect, he's a Championship player. Basically, he was at Oldham a couple of years ago, and they would have gone down without him. I think they scored like 36 goals that season. It's just something ridiculous. But he was just so good in goal for them that it didn't matter that they barely scored. He's just never been given a fair crack at Middlesbrough, and he's a very good League One goalkeeper.
How do you see it going on Saturday then?
Well, seeing as the absence of the pod has coincided with a winning streak, and now you're back, I kind of feel safe in predicting a win here if I was so inclined. But I'm still not quite buying this run. Kind of feels we sort of come positively on sort of tight margins, and maybe we will start to see things leveling out soon enough. So 1-1 draw.
That feels about right. I've got a question here that was for, I mean, I guess anyone, but given that I don't think those two numbskulls are going to have a clue about this, I'm going to ask you instead. So a question from Sky Blue Hub, who says, if you could sign one player from another League One club, who would it be and why?
Oh, God. I'm trying to think. I suppose instead of just saying who's the best player in League One, which is probably at the moment Chris Maguire, I suppose what is the biggest gap in the team? And I'd probably say a central midfielder who can sort of really control the play. I think that would give us.
Really?
I think that would give us an edge. I think a lot of our build-up play at the moment is either sort of counter-attacking or direct. I like Tom Bayliss. I think he's more of a box-to-box midfielder rather than someone who can get his foot on the ball and run a game. So I'd go for Funzu Ojo from Scunthorpe, who I thought was really good in that regard when he came on against us at the start of the season.
See, I would have literally just interpreted it as who's the best player. I would go for McConville just because I don't think we are crying out for a wide player. I just think he's fat. Every time I've seen him, I just think he looks brilliant. But yeah, that's that. Anything to add? Any other final thoughts on the run?
Not in particular.
Okay, well, that's that then. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, speak to you next week.
Okay, there we go. That's thanks to Dom for tip-top Accrington preview. Let's go on to some questions, etc. Do you want to start with Snog Marry McQuoid, or a brand new feature, or do you want the listener questions first?
I feel like you want to go on to that.
No, I mean I'm not fussed, but if I'm gonna throw it right in. Snog, marry, avoid. So, I mean, the rules are implicit in the title. Obviously, we've thrown in Josh McCoy's name because that's what we do with these features. This week, the options are Stuart Linnell, Stuart Pearce, and Stuart Bevan. Bear in mind, it was Ewan Rowe on Twitter who proved to be the inspiration for this idea. We're going for his suggestion first. So, Stuart Linnell, Stuart Pearce, Stuart Bevan. Paul, Snog, marry, McCoy.
I'm going to marry Linnell. I'm going to snog Stuart Pearce, and I'm going to avoid Stuart Bevan.
Would you care to shed any light into that? I'm surprised at marrying Stuart Linnell. Is that because he's the closest to dying?
No, I just think he would be the sort of man who would make me a cup of tea in the morning and give me a nice rub when I needed one.
Is that a glimpse into your current marriage?
Yeah, Jane makes me a cup of tea in the morning.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's not probably. Actually, it's not really that outlandish, is it? Yeah.
I'd like to think it's probably not.
Neil,
I would avoid Linnell like the plague. I would marry Pierce. It looks like he could pull up a shed, and I guess that leaves me snogging Stuart Bevan, but that's not good for anybody. So.
Neil, I'm going with you. I just feel like. I feel like Stuart Pearce is quite a good bloke.
Yeah, all-round good guy. Get the paper in the morning, all that sort of stuff.
I remember I used to work for Barclays, and we had tickets as part of their sponsorship of the Premier League for I think it was the FA Youth Cup of some description, and it was United's youth team against Tottenham's youth team. It was quite an interesting game to be at, actually, because the scorers were Kane and Lingard and Januzaj, and it actually ended up being quite a interesting set of young players to watch. But I went with a mate of mine who's a bit of a loose cannon and is a Man City fan, and he didn't come up for the first half. He stayed down drinking and then came for the second half. Stuart Pearce was sat the row in front of us, and as soon as he came up for the second half, this City fan mate of mine just immediately just launched straight into Stuart Pearce, and Stuart Pearce would have had every right to turn around and just be like, shut the fuck up. But actually, he took it really, really well. He was really good sport and really put this mate of mine in his place in like a sort of fun, cheery way. He seemed like a really lovely fella, so that's my Stuart Pearce anecdote for the evening. So yeah, I would marry Stuart Pearce. I'd snog Bevan. He's all right, isn't he? And he doesn't score any goals, but that hopefully might be
He
a
seemed
good...
fairly intense.
Yeah,
There's some of the photos I've seen of him just staring into the camera. I guess he'll give it a good go,
He
wouldn't
might
he?
do a lovely kiss. And yeah, I'd probably avoid it now. So that's Snog, Marry, McCoy. Let's do some questions if we've got any. Umberto Biro asks, are you not tempted to keep it stum and not jinx the great run? We got a lot of questions along those lines. We'll probably skip that one. We got a question from the newly resurrected CCFC with the impossibly phonetic...
Oh, not this again.
Yeah. And just how good has the douche been since his public dressing down at Bristol Rovers? Impressively handled by MR Neil.
He is improving very, very well. Yeah, it's actually been really impressive, the way he's come back from that, because as a kid, you don't know how that's going to go. And at the time, it kind of felt, taking him off at half-time, it can feel quite harsh, but maybe that's another sign of good management from Robbins. He judged the character right, because let's face it, if you see him outside of the football sort of arena, Sterling seems like a very confident young man. So maybe it was the right thing to do at the right time. And no, he's starting to actually believe in himself with the ball a lot more than he was in those opening games. So long may it continue. And as Grimmer returns to fitness as well, suddenly there's another area of the pitch where you've got a real battle. And as far as it goes at the moment, Sterling's got that shirt.
We've discussed this in the past, where you get lucky injuries. Whether or not, I think for Sterling, Grimmer getting injured was possibly up there with him being bollocked against Bristol Rovers, because it just took all the pressure off from everyone not having Grimmer there, because suddenly you didn't have everyone analysing every single aspect of this game to justify why Grimmer should be back in the team. He was actually just allowed to get on with it. And it's amazing how, as he's got better, he's become less and less of a discussion point. When at the start of the season, because he was keeping Grimmer out, he was the discussion. Now he's having good games. You barely see any comments about the fact he's had another good game, which I feel a bit sorry for him for, because he has really sort of proven that there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, he looks like a different player, doesn't he?
Oh,
yeah.
Are you having a collar?
It's. I assume it's either Bernie or George. Is it, Paul?
Oh yeah, that's Bernie just on my lap.
Oh, it's a cat. Oh.
Yeah.
Look at me pretending like I didn't know it was a cat.
Yeah, I don't know why we got him a new collar with like Big Ben on him. So everywhere he goes, he's like, "Where's Bernie?" It's like the clock out of fucking Peter Pan.
Question from Simon Miller says, how good have we been, or are we riding our luck? We've talked about that, I feel like, haven't we? Paul Lee Bradbury asks, assuming that Willis is first choice centre-back when fit, would you go for Davis or Hyam?
I would go for a whole new centre-back who could play football. No.
Why are you so obsessed with footballers being able to pass a football?
I don't know. It's a bit odd, isn't it? I have a begrudging respect for Tom Davis, as much as he is the complete anathema of what I look for in a footballer. There is something about it. He headed the ball out of play in the second half, which I would say that 90% of footballers would have just headed, but he headed it with all the enthusiasm and passion, like his life depended on him heading that ball out of play for their throw-in. And you can't help but like someone who literally puts their life on the line every single time the ball comes near them, even if they don't need to, even if it's just the most basic thing in the planet, they still do it at that intensity. And he's sort of, to some extent, winning me over. I don't think I'm ever going to be completely sold on him, because I still think he kicks the ball in the way that even my 3-year-old daughter would find bizarre. But
does he?
Yeah, he's a big time shinner. There are some accurate shins, but there is some serious shinning going on.
his technique of kicking the ball is almost like my wife. Obviously, is nearly in her mid-30s, and she kicks a ball, and you're like, you've never learned how to kick a ball properly. You look at Tom Davis, and you're like, that's not a technique that's been taught at an academy.
I've never noticed. I'm gonna have to watch this now.
Yeah, it is
beautiful.
Stark. Yeah, but as I said,
This is the same man I wanted on our free kicks.
Yeah, but I think they're accurate. That's the thing. So his technique, his technique might not be like particularly pretty, but it does work. I think he's a reasonably accurate passer of the ball.
Yeah, I think there are obviously magnificent technicians of kicking a ball, and there are people like Tom Davis. And as I said earlier, I think you can be an amazing goal scorer. Like Mickey Kim was an amazing goal scorer, but he was quite a poor footballer. You can be an amazing centre half, especially at League One level, and not be that good at actually playing football, because what your aspects of what you're trying to achieve are different. Because what he's trying to do is basically read the game and put his body between the ball and our goal, and he's doing that really well.
I think there's something. Now, you're going to assume that I'm talking about the physicality, and I'm not. But there was. Well, do you remember when we had Reader Johnson, and there was this strange thing of that win record that we'd got with him in the team, which was like unimpeachable, despite the fact that he was just a psychopath. Like he had no positional sense, and there's this sort of like indefinable X factor about when Reader Johnson was on the pitch. We're just a better team, and I feel like that with Davis a bit. I feel like we are. I think he is no better, particularly than Hyam. I think I prefer him a bit to Willis, but there's something that happens in the team where and I don't know whether it's that sort of Jim O'Brien thing that we talk about, where that kind of intensity and drive like motivates other players. There's something about him being on the pitch where I just think we look like a better team when he's on it. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I like him. I think he's plus kicking technique aside, because I've not seen that. I quite like his passing. Am I weird?
I do. Yeah. No, I think I think he. I think at first I was like, look at that funny kick, and then because you were looking at it, you were like, he's getting a lot of them long range passes like pretty on the nose. Okay, I think we might be done.
Yeah.
It seems like a good time to wrap things up, doesn't it? If there's anyone got anything to plug, are we selling anything this month? Are we shilling anything for anybody? I don't think we are. It's usually me at the forefront of trying to get additional funds through to the bank account. So I guess if I don't have anything to push, then there's probably nothing to push. I think we will leave it there then. Paul, thank you. It was good to have you back.
Cheers, thank you.
Neil, likewise.
Thank you, boys.
And thank you, listener. Bye.